Hello everyone, it's your favorite Square Enix pleb over here. After Breath of Fire I said I was gonna play more RPGs from different companies. Guess what, that hasn't happened. In fact, I think I've only played Square Enix RPGs since then, so, let's shake things up again. And man, this really is the right opportunity to do so. There's so many amazing RPGs coming out as of late. But what to play? Well, I'm a huge fan of everything that Nintendo makes, and Xenoblade Chronicles is very well regarded. The trilogy's been out for a while now, and I've heard great things about every single entry. Yes, this makes total sense. I should definitely play Xenoblade Chronicles. So I'm gonna start playing Xenosaga instead. Yes, Xenosaga. The other trilogy of JRPGs that Monolith Soft has made. And this is definitely an obscure trilogy. I don't think I've ever really heard anyone talk about the Xenosaga games before. All I know is that this character makes a cameo in Xenoblade 2 and this scene with this dude that's probably watched too many Saw movies. I suppose it'd be an interesting experience, playing the games by a company before they had their breakout hit. Sadly, I can't play the game in any legal form as the first and third episode never made it into Europe. They did release episode 2 however, and they wondered why it sold horribly in Europe. Part 2 in a very story-focused trilogy of games, that you need to play the first game to understand the second game. Oh gee, I wonder why Part 2 sold poorly. So for this video, I'm playing the undubbed version from my PS2 hard drive. It removes some censorship and keeps most of the dialogue in Japanese. May as well go as authentic as the original version used to be. But I can imagine some of you still have an interest in the game, so go to the timestamp you see on the screen to skip the plot summary. The story begins with a monolith rising from the ocean after being discovered by a bunch of archaeologists. We cut 4,000 years ahead to the crew of a spaceship called the Woglind, where we meet Chief Scientist Shion and her battle android creation KOS-MOS. Humanity is at war with these alien life forms called the Gnosis. In a really long opening, I'm talking hours, we get used to life on the Woglind, meeting with all the nice and not so nice crew members like Officer Virgil for instance. That is until the Gnosis attack the Woglind and proceed to massacre the fuck out of everyone. KOS-MOS activates herself, shoots the hell out of everything, including Officer Virgil because he was in the way and no one told her friendly fire was turned on. Why did she kill another human?
Update my fucking graphics card.
And in these first two chapters, KOS-MOS is really shown to be humanity's trump card, both in the story and in the actual gameplay. She is extremely powerful at this point. None of the others even compare. In fact, it is because KOS-MOS materialized the Gnosis to begin with that they can even do damage to them. Which makes me ask, how did we get this army to begin with? Clearly it doesn't work on these forces unless under very specific circumstances. So, how are we not all dead already? KOS-MOS and Shion manage to escape to a civilian ship called the Elsa, where they meet the crew, including a kid with mysterious dispelling powers called Chaos. In the meantime, a cyborg named Ziggurat-8, Ziggy for short, is instructed to rescue Momo, a Realian with critical information. Realians are synthetic humans built with set purposes. Kind of like replicants from Blade Runner if you've ever seen that, but with a better social standing more equal to that of humans. Doesn't stop the racism though, and yes, they flat out fucking say that. The two barely manage to escape the facility that held Momo, and their escape ship ends up being rescued by the Elsa, as they fend off the opposing forces from the U-TIC, another hostile force behind the scenes. U-TIC's commander Margulis sends a mysterious man named Albedo after them whilst the group gets eaten by the Gnosis. They manage to escape and get rescued by Junior, a boy that partially leads a place called the Foundation together with his brother Guinan, both seemingly having some sort of connection with Albedo. The U-TIC released doctored footage of an attack made by the Foundation on the Galactic Federation, basically the Space Navy. So our 6 characters travel inside of KOS-MOS to find a black box with unaltered footage as evidence of their innocence. It is also at this point that I realize that we've gone inside of other things multiple times now. I wonder if that's going to be a recurring thing for the rest of the series. Whilst inside the memory, Shion is informed of a godlike energy called Udo, that needs to be stopped by KOS-MOS in order to save the universe. As they leave, another Gnosis attack happens, during which Albedo kidnaps Momo and psychologically tortures the hell out of her.
You mean like this? Or like this? Or this? Or this?
Actually, this torture scene was censored in a very confusing way that I don't really understand. So in Japan, he's holding a knife, and holding a knife to a girl probably doesn't fly very well in the West. Instead, they removed the knife, but they still full-on show the decapitation that was censored in the Japanese version of the game. So, if you play the Japanese version, you get a guy threatening a girl with a knife and implied gore. If you play the American version, he has no knife, but he just straight up rips his head and arm off with his hand, and you get full-on gore. America! Why was decapitation okay? I don't understand that. Well, after that wonderful bit of playtime, he plays the Song of Nephilim, a way to attract the Gnosis to this location. The Federation kills the Gnosis, the group clashes with Albedo and rescue Momo, but not before being stopped by a resurrected Virgil, which doesn't really mean much and has no closure in this episode. Albedo leaves, pulls out another magic weapon and kills the entire fleet before telling the gang, lol, just come and try and stop me, to which I go, wait, didn't we just try this? And thus we proceed to go through the same motions again. We enter what I assume is the space colony Ark, and fight Albedo again. Him telling Junior in a Star Wars-esque reveal that he's his brother, and him escaping again. I mean, the fucking dude is immortal. I don't know how we think we could have won anyway, but after killing the core of the ship and preventing its crash into the planet Miltia 2 below, the day is saved for now, it seems. I don't think it's surprising that there's a lot of unfinished story bits left, considering this is supposed to be episode 1 since its inception. Even the original Japanese version was called Episode 1, so future installments were always a part of the plan. What is Albedo up to with the data he stole from Momo? The backstories of pretty much every party member aside from Shion have massive holes in them and aren't fleshed out. Why is KOS-MOS not homicidal anymore? What was in Ziggy's past? Momo's stolen data? Who the fuck is Chaos? And Junior's further relation with Albedo. All of this is just so ever slightly touched upon, or not spoken about at all, but we don't have any concrete answers yet. And that's just the party members. There's so many goddamn concepts, threats, characters, and objects that require more explanation. Like the Zohar and its emulated counterparts. These are a source of power to connect to Udo, but I feel like there's not enough there to make me care, as opposed to say the Monado from Xenoblade Chronicles, which I know bits and pieces of. I guess it's cool they're heavily symbolic in Christianity, the original being Jesus and the emulated ones being the 12 Apostles. Ah yes, my favorite painting. I don't think it's fair to view the story as standalone so far. It would be like someone talking about the Fellowship of the Ring without ever going into the story of the sequels. I can only imagine how lucky it is that we did in fact get more episodes. Because if we didn't, man, that story would have felt inconclusive. And seeing as Albedo is on the cover of 2, I imagine I'll be seeing a lot more of him, which, on that note, Albedo has definitely been the highlight for me. This scene and part of his backstory in episode 2 were the only things I knew about the game's heading in. Most other characters felt pretty one-note thus far, or I don't know near enough yet to give a proper analysis. But this man goes from being a weird stalker to batshit insane near the end of the game. He's like Xan from Twilight Princess on steroids. If he's more present in the future episodes, I am all for it. I clocked in about 27 to 28 hours for episode 1, and I've heard episode 2 is significantly shorter. I do hope all these characters have their respective arcs by the end, but only time will tell as I go through these. The presentation overall felt pretty good, occasional PS2 jank notwithstanding. None of the music really stuck out to me, except the piece that you hear when reading your email. There was a lot of silence in the game, and I know that the later games don't have the best reputation for the soundtrack, but anything has to be better than just pure deafening silence. If they wanted to give me an uneasy vibe, they sure accomplished that, but I don't think they did that in the best way possible. It felt more like a budget decision than a stylistic one. Visuals kept pretty consistent, however, regardless if it was an FMV or an in-game cutscene. Despite not really being that important in the plot so far, I can see the amount of effort that went into KOS-MOS' design. One was clearly designed with marketing in mind, and the others, The game had some cool aesthetics from futuristic to gory. I would have liked a bit more variety, as a lot of it was very sterile, but considering I still have 2 episodes to go though, I reckon it's fine for now. Okay, now as far as gameplay goes, the game is broken up between dungeons and story bits. There's no overworld or non-linear design to speak of. You have set areas where you need to go from A to B. Sometimes this is a dungeon, and sometimes just an area that hosts side quests, treasure, and optional encounters. There is one map, but it's really more so meant as a way to connect the different areas of the Foundation, so I wouldn't really count it. So those looking for a giant world with all kinds of hidden secrets, you'll be disappointed. Xenosaga seems to be your typical turn-based battle RPG, but it has some twists that make it stand out. You move based on how many ability points you have, which you gain each turn. The more ability points you have, the more attacks you can do per turn. You can also carry over ability points to the next turn to do an even longer chain of attacks with more devastating results. So for instance, KOS-MOS can chain from a melee attack to a ranged attack and finally into her finisher. It's very much like a fighting game combo, but the game does a good job of giving you clear options, so you don't need to memorize any button combinations. Aside from that, characters also have ether moves. These are the equivalent of most magic moves like cure, buffing yourself. As turns go by, you also increase the boost gauge, which allows for a whole extra turn to be given to another character. Finally, there's the A.G.W.S, or eggs that characters can summon. These are mechs that give a combat boost but have a major downside of barely being able to recover damage taken. The only ways being frame repair items or taking them to a shop. This essentially makes them boss weapons, as premature use would be squandering the limited health they have. The game heavily introduces all of these fight mechanics in the tutorial at the start, so it's not like you'll be left to your own devices immediately. There's even an introductory boss for the eggs. It's quite the info dump on mechanics, but should suffice for the rest of the game. And speaking of bosses, each boss usually requires you to find the fitting strategy for that encounter. You can't really brute force your way through them by power leveling and using basic attacks. What moves will result in a heavy counterattack? What status effect may work? How do I manipulate gambling? The last one is not a joke, by the way. There's this bonus mechanic that gives you 1 of 4 bonuses in a set rotation for every character's turn. There was a specific boss, however, that used a devastating attack if the critical hit bonus happens on his turn. As a result, it is up to the player to properly time boosts and actions to make sure the boss never gets this opportunity. It really makes you think that you're manipulating the game's design. The downside being, if you start the fight with poor stats, you'll probably immediately get whacked by the super attack and die. In fact, whilst bosses usually have neat strategies for defeating them, learning those strats can be a bit trial and error, as bosses also adapt throughout the fight. And there's not an insane amount of bosses either, so when you do fight one, it's definitely a bit of a hurdle. The biggest thing is though that, though the combat structure is understandable enough, having normal and ether moves with extra finishers depending on the AP you have, and then some boss killing mechs to top things off, that doesn't mean that stat boosting isn't the most complex thing ever. There's basic level ups for sure, that you just get from getting experience from battles, but there's also ether points with which you can learn new ether attacks that you might find in someone's skill tree. But wait, you can also transfer existing ethers to other characters with those points. How about tech points to increase power, speed, priority and more of the combo finishers you have? Or use tech points to just increase your actual stats. Skill points to learn item effects permanently, so you don't need to equip the item. Fucking egg weapon pairings, frame and generator types. Too much of a money sink? No worries, just invest by replying to these emails from a Nigerian prince and you'll be drowning in money. Download PDF files that end up being massive weapon upgrades for KOS-MOS. I wish my Adobe Reader could do this. There's a genuine email system in this game for stuff as mundane as video game ads to a whole side quest where you have to bully a redditor, and you get fat stacks for doing so. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. The story, the combat, and the stat mechanics. All of it. It definitely took me sitting down a couple times and just think about what I was actually doing. You do get a lot of freedom in the way you approach building your characters, despite them having certain basic preferences. And as a result, certain fights might go differently for different players. However, near endgame, none of that matters a goddamn thing, as there's one universal best attack in the game. Along your journey, you'll see these red locked doors. After finding the keys to these doors, you'll be able to reclaim the treasure inside. Most of these are great weapons and accessories, but 6 are robot parts. Combined, they form the Air de Kaiser, a Megazord ripoff that does a standard 9,999 damage attack regardless of defense and hits every target. Considering almost no encounter, not even the bosses, have higher HP than that, and that the final boss has the highest HP count at 16,000, this disgusting atom bomb of a weapon is absolutely fantastic. When I beat the boss in the penultimate chapter, that was it. The last chapter was a celebratory victory lap with me spamming the Air Kaiser every chance I got. I do wonder if my team setup was proper at the end. I was a bit too focused on ether attacks, I think. But it was nothing a little grinding wouldn't have fixed, so in the end walking away with my instant win button felt pretty great. That thing is going on the endgame killer list alongside Knights of the Rounds and the Chrysogrim. I don't know if every game in the Xenosaga trilogy has an equivalent of a super weapon like the Air Kaiser. I do kinda hope so. I really miss overpowered weaponry in modern games. So yeah, Xenosaga Episode I was quite an experience. I had a pretty good time, despite some flaws. The biggest thing I'm looking forward to is the evolution going forward. I hear that each part checks if the memory card has a cleared save of the previous game on it, so I hope the potential reward would be good. Also, I hope to see the story develop and explain more of those loose threats and characters. Also, more Albedo. And another Air Kaiser. I mean, come on. It definitely feels like the first episode of a pending mindfuck of a narrative, but despite some blemishes, the experience has been pretty fun.